Hi everyone and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to make an adorable, unique, super fun, fancy party bag that you can wear wherever, whenever. And it's actually pretty beginner friendly, which kind of took me by surprise. Today, we're gonna make the Mini Alice crossbody bag, and this pattern comes to us from Rosa Patterns. Now, Rosa Patterns are notorious for being very unique. I mean, just so chic, so unique, but the patterns are written so well that it is so easy to follow. You don't find yourself kind of wandering around figuring out what you're supposed to do next. Sometimes like this bag, for instance, you don't really see the finished product until it's completely finished. I'll promise you, like as we go through the tutorial, there are moments where you're like, I don't see it. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm gonna walk you through that, don't worry. Because in the very end, when it all comes together, it looks amazing. So let's talk about this cute little bag. So the material I'm using for this bag is actually the material that's in the December Bag Making Bee Club box, which is so fun. I honestly thought that this vinyl would be a little more advanced beginner intermediate. It's not. This is a great beginner vinyl. A great beginner vinyl, especially for this bag. Now the bag has a lot of options for quilting, for riveting. We're just using like a quilted vinyl and kind of cheating and saving a lot of steps. This bag comes together remarkably fast. You're gonna be surprised. But you can see it has a front and the back. We have this really unique little handle here, so you don't have to wear the chain strap. If you don't want to, you can just take that off and carry it. This handle is so cute. Look at the top. It's got a turn lock on it, and you open it up, and the handle pieces come apart like this. I don't know when you would need to do that, but it is a really, really cute decorative feature that will make it easier actually to open and close the bag if you need to. So once you see you have a double zip here, let's open this up. And then inside, if you have the box, we have this adorable tag from Heartwood and Hide. It says, "Never dull your sparkle." It is such a good bag. This was kind of a New Year's Eve inspired design when it comes to the material. When the girls and I were picking out all the material, we were like, well, what's a bag that people could take to like a Christmas party, a New Year's Eve party? And then like we all came up with this. We're like, oh, this is perfect for that. But then at the same time, we all kind of looked at each other like, are any of us going to any of those kinds of parties? And no, at least I'm not. I'm not going to any sort of fancy New Year's Eve parties. But this bag, I wore it out to a recent little concert that Mila's school put on, and I would wear it out to the grocery store. So this bag looks great, all dressed up with some fancy clothes, fancy shoes. It also looks really good with jeans, which is what I'm wearing today. I'm gonna show you. So you can see this crossbody bag does have a chain strap. You don't have to use a chain strap. You can create your own crossbody strap so it's adjustable if you'd like. But if you got the box, I just wanna show you how it looks like on. So I'm 5'4", smaller medium. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, it comes down right to my hip. And I'm just wearing a t-shirt and jeans right now, and it is so stinking cute. I mean, look at that. It's just like a little blank. Can't see it though, because I'm not tall enough. But this pattern is so good. I don't know how many of you guys have seen this. The pattern's not new. It's been around for a while. And I know me personally, I loved it when I first saw it. But then I was like, oh my gosh, it looks really hard. Like, look at those curves. That looks really hard. I don't know. And so I kept putting it off and putting it off. And finally, I made it. And you guys, don't put this off. This is not a super challenging pattern, especially if you use the right material. So I would suggest using some sort of a vinyl or a cork. But make sure it's something that's easy to work with. The stiffer and thicker the material, the harder this is going to be. So I'm gonna give you lots of tips throughout the tutorial today on how to deal with the vinyl, how to work with it, and areas we can actually thin it out even more to make it a lot easier to use. So if you're interested in the Bag Making Bee Club, I'll have a link down below if you want to join that subscription. It is a monthly subscription. Every box is a mystery, and it's super fun. It's put together by Gabby from Wonderground Fabrics, Jade from Heartwood and Hide, and myself, the three of us. We work really hard to try to pick out really cool materials, really great patterns, for each month. I mean, there's a lot of thought and discussion that goes into these boxes, so we really hope you love them. Thank you also to Rosa for allowing us to use your patterns on the OklaRoots YouTube channel. You guys know I love Rosa. I've already talked about it. If you've seen my previous videos, we're big fans over here, so I'll have a link down below for this pattern as well as some of the other patterns. If you see a pattern from Rosa you'd really like to see featured on the channel, make sure you leave a comment down below and we will add it to the list. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comments section. All right, guys, let's get started making this adorable little Alice. All right, so we're only going to be using 3 pieces of material for today's bag, which makes it a very quick prep and a very quick sew. You're going to need about a half a yard to 3/4 of a yard of your exterior material. And this is gonna be like a faux leather, a cork, a vinyl, something like that. We're using this beautiful vinyl that already has this like quilted look to it. It's very cool. It's got a little bit of kind of batting on the back. So we don't need any foam, we don't need any woven interfacing, we don't need anything like that. This exterior is just all prepped and ready to go. I'm gonna show you kind of how to mess with it to thin it out in some spots. You're also gonna need at least a half a yard of your lining material. This could be quilt cotton, but you know we love to use water-resistant canvas because again, we don't have to interface it, which just cuts the prep time down significantly. And then you're gonna need about a 1/4 yard of Decovil Heavy. Now this is gonna be for a little bit of stabilization. We're not using even close to that. We're using a very small amount and we're really only gonna use it for the little bits on the top and for a couple hardware installs. So we're not using a whole bunch of this. We're also not using any sort of foam because we're not quilting anything, and we're not using any woven interfacing. So this is it today. Very quick. So here's all of our hardware today. All this hardware is just gonna make everything very easy. We have 1 zipper with 2 zipper pulls. You do want a double zipper pull. Be comfortable installing zipper pulls after the zipper is already installed. We will not be, the zipper will be separated. We're also gonna have some purse feet here. You're gonna have 4 purse feet. And then we have a turn lock. The turn lock is very simple to install. We have a beautiful little custom tag for this month's box. It says never dull your sparkle. It's from Heartwood and Hide and it's gorgeous. Like I said, it's kind of a New Year's inspiration. It's also just very good for any sort of celebration or just, you know, being excited. I have a metal bag tag I'll be using today. And then instead of creating our own little D-ring connectors with pieces of material and with little D-ring, we have these are cool. These are screw-in D-ring holders. It just makes it all so easy to install. And then we have a chain strap. Again, if you want to make your own, go for it. But a chain strap is just super quick, super easy. Okay, so here's the other stuff today. Lots and lots of clips. Lots of clips. You might actually even want some like more heavy duty clips as well for the very end when we have to kind of glue stuff together. You're gonna need some really good glue. So I'm using Beacon 3-in-1 glue. Even if you wanted to use like some sort of a crafty cement glue, that would be good too. Or even like an E6000 glue. Maybe I'll use that as well if I have any. You want some strong glue for the end of this today. I have a set of screwdrivers. This is going to be to install a lot of those bits of hardware. I do have a hole punch, which again is going to be used to help install some of the hardware today. The thread I'll be using through my needle is a Tex 45 weight variegated thread. The thread I'll be using in my bobbin is a Mara 100 weight thread, and then the needle I'll be using today is a Microtex 8012. I didn't have any parts using this material on this pattern where it was super thick or difficult to sew. So I don't have any issues. The vinyl works really well. All the material works really well together. I'll give you tips along the way. But 8012 needle worked fine for me the whole time. And then I have a double-sided tape here, which is an easy to sew over, wash away double-sided tape, and it's a 1/4 inch size. And then I have a small bit of duct tape. This is just for some of the hardware install. Next, I have an air erasing marker, a vinyl marker, and then I have a seam ripper and stiletto combo here. You're gonna need the seam ripper, and stiletto is just a tool that I always like to use. Then I have a lighter to clean up any loose threads, a turning tool just in case you need to turn out some corners. And then I have another stiletto. This is the one I always keep by my sewing machine. This is gonna help with any sort of like rounded, tricky bits. All right, so let's go through our pattern pieces. First, we have our main panel A. This is gonna be the exterior, and you're gonna have 2 cuts of these. And if you're using any sort of quilt cotton or if you're using a sort of foam, there's a lot of different options for designing these main panels. Just make sure you pay attention to that and the materials required for that. If you were going to be quilting something, it's always good to kind of have a bigger piece of material and then quilt it onto your foam and then use the pattern piece to cut it smaller because quilting does cause things to shrink a little bit. Pre-quilted vinyl is kind of like, just like such a cheat, but it's so great. It's so much easier. So I have 2 cuts of that already cut. And then you're gonna have 2 cuts of your lining. Make sure you notice that the lining and the exterior are not the same cuts at all. They are very different. So you have 2 cuts of that, and for me, that is just 2 cuts of the water-resistant canvas. No interfacing or anything like that. Next up, we have an exterior base cut. This is just for the bottom of the exterior of the bag. And then you're gonna have 2 cuts of your exterior material for the zipper panel, and then 2 more cuts of your lining material for the zipper panel. Again, notice they are different sizes. These are pretty narrow, so make sure whatever material you're using for your exterior isn't super thick or tough or can kind of crack easily. You know, this looks, honestly, I did not think this was going to be beginner friendly, and I take that back. It's very beginner friendly. This is very malleable, easy to work with, not too lightweight, not stretchy, doesn't stiffen up, doesn't crack. So I wouldn't use a really, really thick material for this, just because these are so narrow, and we are going to be having 3/8 inch seam allowance along both sides, so it's just leaves a little strip. You know what I mean? And then finally, you're going to have 4 cuts for your lock connectors, and then you're going to have 4 cuts of stabilizer. And I already attached the stabilizer to the back. If you're using a material from the box, do not iron the back of this. Don't let your iron touch the back of this. This, like, little fleecy backing, it will melt right onto your iron. So don't do that. I just used the Beacon 3-in-1 glue, and I glued these pieces to the back of this material. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to rip this material off around the edges when we get to that point. And I'm going to show you how to thin it out even more. But you're gonna need 4 cuts of this and attach the stabilizer however you can. So besides the lock connectors, the other prep you wanna do is gonna be on your base panel, and so on the back of it. Now, like I said, I'm not using any stabilizer back here, but you definitely can. You can use some Decovil Heavy if you'd like. I'm gonna add that later as I attach the purse feet later. But you do wanna mark little corners on each of the corners here, so little 3/8 of an inch boxes on each corner. And then you're going to want to mark placement for your purse feet, and they're going to be 1.5 inch up from the top and bottom edges, and then 1 3/4 in from the short edges. After you have those marked, then go ahead and mark the midpoints on all 4 edges of your base panel. Okay, so let's prep our front and back panels. Now there's lots of options. You can quilt it, you can rivet it. There's all kinds of fun options in the pattern. You can just leave it as is. We're leaving it as is, even though it looks quilted, which is a great little trick. Make sure you mark the midpoints on the top and the bottom of each one of these panels. And then if you want to attach an outer bag tag to this, pick which one you want to be the front panel or the back panel, depending on where you want to put your tag. All right, so I measured about 3.5 inches up from the bottom and then just marked a dot right in the center of my panel. And then I'm going to use my washer. And if you have a sew-on tag, you can just center your sew-on tag here and then sew it on. But I'm just going to use my washer and mark the lines for the prongs of my bag tag here. And then I'm going to cut myself off a little piece of scrap Decovil Heavy. And I'm going to mark those same lines on the scrap piece here. I want a little bit of extra stabilizer when we're installing hardware. And then grab a seam ripper and gently seam rip right along those marked lines. Be careful because this stuff is very, very easy to seam rip. So you can kind of get a little out of hand and whoop, right off. That would be so sad, so don't do that. So then also seam rip on your stabilizer, and then grab your bag tag, insert it into those slits, flip it over, attach your stabilizer over, what's upside down? Attach your stabilizer over the back of those prongs, and then you can add your washer just like that, and then fold them in on each other or out, however you decide. Let's see, turn it over, make sure it's straight. It's gonna look straight in the end. Don't worry about it. And then grab your duct tape, something to just protect the lining, because this is metal hardware here, and over time when it's rubbing against that lining material, it could rip it, so we don't want to do that. So we're just gonna protect it by putting some tape over it, just like that. So now let's work on our zipper and zipper panels. First thing we want to do is you're gonna grab both exterior zipper panels, both lining panels, and your zipper tape. Very first thing you want to do is mark the midpoint on all of these. So on the long edges of every single one of these, mark that midpoint. And the easiest way to do that is just to fold the material in half. Mark it with a pen if you'd like. I always like to use scissors and just make a teeny tiny little clip right on the corner there. If you're using this quilted material, make sure you get the little batting on the back as well. And that's how I mark the midpoints. And then on the zipper, I'll use a pen to mark there. All right, once you have all the midpoints marked, now you're gonna take your zipper and you're gonna separate it. No zipper pulls. We don't put the zipper pulls on until the very end. And there is no workaround for that. Sometimes we try to do a workaround where we can keep it together because I know it can be challenging to add zipper pulls on in the end. There is no workaround. It is too tight. It is too curvy. You have to do it this way. So you've got to be comfortable adding zipper pulls. You got this. You got this. All right, so grab one of your zipper ends, and then let's grab one lining and one exterior, and we'll just work on these one at a time. So take one of your lining zipper panels, lay it right side up, and then take your zipper with the teeth and lay it right side up and line up the raw edge of the tape with the raw edge of the lining. Grab your clips, center them with their midpoint marks first, and then clip along this top edge. The zipper tape is longer than the lining panel. You know what, let's just do both of these panels at the same time. So I'm gonna grab my other lining panel and my other zipper teeth, and I'm also going to just line them up. Lining panel right side up, zipper right side up, center, and clip together. Okay, now we can take both of these to the sewing machine and let's just baste along these clip edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have the zippers basted onto the lining, grab the exterior cut, and with the zippers right side up, grab your exterior cut and lay it right side down, lining up the midpoints once again on the edge that you just basted and clip together. And this should be about the same length of your zipper tape. My zipper tape is just a little bit longer than the suggested cut, so mine goes off the edge just a little bit. So do this for both panels. And now we're going to take both of these to the sewing machine and sew along both clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end of each one of these. Alright, once you have those sewn on, now what you want to do is you want to fold both the exterior and the lining panel away from the zippers. So I like to just do one at a time. If you have a seam roller here, you can seam roll this. If you want to use some tape on the back of the seam to hold it in place, you can do that. Just try to get these pressed. If you're using a quilt cotton, you can use an iron, but any sort of vinyl or anything like that, you don't want to use an iron. So I just kind of finger press it around the zipper tape like that. And then what I do is I flip the panels wrong sides together, line them up at their midpoint marks first, and then just work on the raw edge. And I'm not really focused on the zipper at all right now, just the raw edge. And once you have that clipped back, you can kind of tug on this a little bit more to get it to flatten out. But really with like this material, I'm just going to be focusing on keeping it flat while it's at the sewing machine. So prep the other zipper panel the same way. All right, once you have both these prepped, we're going to take them to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch right along the edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And this is going to hold that seam in place. Alrighty, once you have that top stitched, remove your clips, but don't let them go far, because after you remove them, you want to grab the lining portion and flip it up towards the zipper teeth and clip it up there. We just want the lining out of the way. Like I said, these are very, very narrow, and we're going to be working on sewing the exterior pieces to the exterior outer panels, the lining pieces to the lining of the bag. You're going to need all this stuff out of the way. So when we're focused on the exterior, we don't want the lining to sneak in there. So do this for both panels. Okay, so now grab one of your main outer panels. I'm going to start with the front panel and lay it right side up. And then you're going to grab one of your zipper panels and you're going to lay it right side down. And yeah, we're going to attach it just like this. Now, I thought this was going to be really difficult, and I found it was not. It might just be the material we're using today. I don't know, but it was much easier than I expected. Match up the midpoint mark on the zipper panel with the midpoint mark on the exterior front panel, and they are right sides together. Grab a couple clips and clip those in place. The pattern does suggest using a staples here to staple this together. I didn't need to, but if you are comfortable doing that, go for it. I actually tried for another part of the pattern with my stapler doesn't even work anymore, so it's just not an option for me. So now we're going to attach the corner. So take the top corner of your zipper panel and line it up. I'm going to do it. The top corner of the zipper panel here on the left, line it up with the top inner corner of the main panel, and just line up that corner, and then clip at the corner and just a little bit below it. Don't worry about the curves just yet. Same thing on the other side. The right side over here, we're going to flip it up to come in with the inner corner of the main panel and just pull them together and clip the corner first and then kind of straighten down the side just a bit and clip in along the side. So this is kind of how it should look. Let's flip this over now. I'm going to look at this side because it's just easier for me. And now we're going to kind of like just round it out. So just naturally let the material go where it wants to go. Again, the vinyl we're using is just so perfect for this because it's not super stiff, but it's not super stretchy. I didn't even need to clip into any of the vinyl to help with, you know, getting the curves to stretch out. I literally just like use these little clips and it lines up perfectly. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, just letting it naturally round out like this. If you find that you have some like bubbling on the zipper panel over here, you can clip into the front panel. So the part that's curved around, like the big spoon, the big spoon, you can clip a little bit into this here to let it spread out so that you don't have any pleating or any little pinches on that zipper panel. But only do it if you need to do it. If you can do this without clipping in it, that will be better. All right, once you have these clipped together, you can sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance along the clipped edge. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. I have sewed it both ways. I've sewn it like this with this side up, and I've sewn it like this with this side up. I prefer to sew it with the exterior panel wrong side up. It seems like it would be more difficult, but typically with curves, that's how we sew it, with the big spoon wrong side up, so that's what I'm gonna do. All right, once you have that all sewn together, just kind of pull it back like this to look. Now, if you have big pleats, you're gonna wanna unpick and then re-sew to smooth those out. But if you have little crinkles like I do here, I just wanna remind you, just as you do this, in the end, it's gonna go like this. Okay, so it's not going to be flat. So in the very end, the bag is gonna be pulled out like this, and a lot of these little crinkles are gonna come out. Okay, so once you have that done, we can trim down our seam allowance. The pattern suggests trimming it down using pinking shears. I don't have pinking shears, so I'm just gonna pretty much trim the seam allowance in half. And what doing this, trimming your seam allowance down, it allows it to curve easier. You don't have so much material back here, kind of acting like a wall, preventing it from curving like it's supposed to. So pinking shears are great because it creates little triangles, so that the material can fold in on itself. Also, just trimming it down a little bit smaller helps. And if you're worried about your stitching kind of pulling and showing here, you can definitely add another row of stitching just to the right, so just a little bit closer to the raw edge of your first row of stitching, just to help reinforce it so that when you pull this out, you don't see any of those stitches. It just depends on your material. The thicker material you have, the more you're gonna wanna do that because the material is so firm and strong, it'll pull on the thread. So now what we wanna do is we wanna push that seam so it's behind the exterior panel, so away from the zipper panel, and we're just gonna top stitch along the front panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now you can unclip your lining panel because what we're gonna do now is attach the lining. Grab one of your main lining panels and find the midpoint on the top and the bottom of the lining panels. So lay your lining panel right side up and then grab your panel with the zipper, and you're gonna lay it so that it is right side down, and the lining is gonna flip so that the lining zipper panel comes right sides together with the lining main panel, and then match up those midpoint marks first and clip those together. Again, if you want to use staples here, go ahead and do that. It really just depends on the material. The stiffer, thicker your material, the more you're gonna want to use staples. And then just like before, we're gonna line up the top inner corner of this lining panel with the top inner corner of the lining main panel. And you notice these are much shorter than the exterior panels are supposed to be. So clip there first. Do the same thing over here on the right side, clipping these corners right sides together. And then once you have that done, you can go around. I like to flip this over so I'm looking at the back of the lining panel and continue clipping the lining panel with the lining zipper panel. Just try to kind of straighten it out as you do this. This one, I don't know if it's the material or the size or what, but I find it's a little easier if I just straighten out each section and then clip together versus letting it kind of like round like a wall in a bowl or a big spoon in a little spoon. So now we're going to sew along this lining clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that sewn together, you can once again just trim this seam in half. Make sure you're only trimming the lining seam. And I hope you notice that for all of these steps, I have used a zipper foot. It's gonna be easier if you use a zipper foot for all of these because everything is so narrow. But nothing should be fighting you, especially if you're using the material from the box. Nothing should be giving you a hard time. If you'd like, you can go ahead and top stitch the seam behind the main panel of the lining, just like we did with the main panel of the exterior. I don't find it's necessary, so, less work the better. I just push it down like this so the lining's in there. And there you go. You have one panel all ready to go. This is how it should look. So now you're just going to repeat that exactly for the other exterior lining and zipper panel. I'm going to do that off camera because it is the exact same thing we just did with this panel. There is no difference. So I'll do that and then meet you back. All right, once you have both the front and back panel all sewn together, let's just put this to the side for a moment while we work on the base panel. Okay, so now I'm gonna install my purse feet. I have my little purse feet, I have 4 pieces of Decoville Heavy, and then I have my base panel with the purse feet markings on the back. All right, so now using those marks on the back of my base panel, I'm going to just take a seam ripper and seam rip a teeny, like the teeniest, tiniest slit on each side of those marks. So this is the marks for the purse feet. I mean, like it's just 1/8 of an inch maybe, not quite 1/4 of an inch, just the teeniest, tiniest slit on each side. And then I'm gonna take my purse feet, and from the right side, I'm gonna insert 1 prong in each slit, and it should be a pretty tight fit. Slide it through just like that. Do this for all 4 purse feet. Okay, so once you have them all 4 put in the front on the right side, this is how it should look, and then on the back it should look just like this. Now grab 4 pieces of Decoville Heavy and do the same thing. You're just gonna, you can mark a dot on the center of all these, but it makes it easier, so I'll do that. So I'm just gonna mark a little dot right in the center of all of my Decoville Heavy scraps here. And then on each side of that dot, I'm just gonna make the tiniest little slit with my seam ripper. And so these scraps of Decoville Heavy are gonna act as my stabilizer, and they're also gonna act as my washers. So instead of a metal washer, we're gonna use the Decoville Heavy. And then just take your Decoville Heavy and insert it over the prongs, and then spread the prongs open nice and tight. Let's do this for all 4 of them. And then once you have those installed, I like to grab some duct tape to just put over the back of them. This is gonna hold them in place really well, and it's also gonna protect your lining, so you don't have to worry about the metal hardware rubbing against your lining and causing any sort of wears and tears. All right, there we go. Your base panel is now prepped. So now grab one of your exterior main panels and move the lining out of the way. Lay the exterior main panel right side up. Grab your exterior bottom panel and lay it right side down, and match the midpoint marks on the long edge of your base with the bottom edge of your exterior front panel. Use your clips to clip these together. And now we're gonna sew from the square that we marked all the way to the other square at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So it should be right at the corner of that 3/8 inch square. We just don't want to go all the way to the short edge of the base panel. So start here, 3/8 inch, all the way till you reach the corner of the other square. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that sewn, lift up the bottom corner here of your base panel. I like to lift it up from the short side and pull it over and get it out of the way, because what you're gonna do is you're gonna clip into the bottom edge of your front panel, and you're going to cut right where the thread stops, and you're just gonna cut all straight up. Now don't cut your thread, but get very close to it. So you see, this is how it's cut right here. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna lift up the short edge of the base panel, and I'm going to cut perpendicular to the bottom edge of the main panel, right up to that piece of stitching. Okay, so now let's lift the base panel down. Take the sides of your front main panel and fold them up behind the main panel. Only the sides here. So not the center of it, just the sides. It doesn't have to be a perfect fold, just out of the way. And then you're gonna take the seam behind the base panel and you're gonna push it down behind that base panel. So it should kind of pull like this. You see how this bit here, this little flap here is gonna go up behind the main panel. The rest of the seam is gonna go down behind the base panel. So like right at the corner of the base and the main, the seam for the main panel is going behind the main panel, and the seam for the base panel is going behind the base panel. Maybe if I flip this over. So you see, the seams are spread right here, just like that. That's how we want them. And now on the front, I like to mark where we're going to be starting and stopping our stitching, because we're not going to go all the way to the end with our top stitching. So you can grab a ruler if you'd like and mark 3/8 of an inch in from each short edge right along the seam. And now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch along the base panel, holding that seam in place at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting and stopping at those marks, so not going all the way to the ends. For this one, the pattern suggests not backstitching, but leaving the tails long. So the top thread and bobbin thread on both sides, leave those pieces of thread very long, and we'll tie them off after we sew it. All right, now with those tails long, flip it over so you're looking at the back, and then pull the bobbin thread just a little bit, and you should see the top thread kind of poke in just pull that top thread to the back. Do this on both sides, so both the bobbin and top thread are on the back side here. And then just triple knot this. That's what I like to do. Just 3 tight knots, and then just trim down those threads. You don't have to worry about trimming too close to the knots because this is all on the back side. It's not going to be seen. And then if you'd like to add some fray check to help, or a little dop glue or something like that, you definitely can. I'm just going to leave it. So now we're going to repeat that with the other panel, so I'll walk you through it. So I'm going to take the other main panel, lay it right side up, take my current panel, and with the base panel right side down, I'm going to match up those midpoint marks and clip them together, and then just line up the raw edges here. And once again, we're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance along this clipped edge, starting and stopping 3/8 of an inch from the short edges where the corners of those boxes are, and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end here. Once those are sewn together, just lift up the short edge over here so that the base panel's out of the way, and you're going to clip along the bottom edge just with your scissors, cut straight from the bottom edge up to the edge where that thread is, but you're not cutting your thread. Do this on both sides. There we go. And now we're going to flip the base panel down. On the edges of the front panel, just fold them up and clip them out of the way. And then where the base panel is, make sure the seam is below the base panel. So if we flip this over once again, this is what it looks like. The sides are clipped up. Right at the corner here of the base panel, the seam is split open, and then the rest of the seam is behind the base panel. So flipping this back over, we're going to top stitch along the base panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting and stopping 3/8 of an inch from the short edges, and leave those tails long so that we can tie them off. Once you have that top stitched, I know it's getting kind of big, I'm going to rotate it. Once you have that top stitched, flip it wrong side up, you can remove these clips, and then pull on the bobbin thread to get the top threads to come to the wrong side over here. Should be pretty easy to do since we didn't backstitch. And then just give them 3 tight knots on each side and trim your threads down. All right, when you flip it over, this is how it should look. So now, focusing again on the exterior, we're going to bring our exterior panels right sides together, thinking about the side edges here. So just keep the lining out of the way. The lining really shouldn't be getting in the way because it is smaller, so you shouldn't really be fighting it at all. But right now we're just working on the side panels of the exterior and getting those clipped together. So then just tuck everything out of the way and do this on the other side as well. Okay, now we're going to sew along both sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the top and the bottom. If you'd like to do a second row stitching right outside of it, if you're using a thicker vinyl, I highly suggest you do that. All right, once you have that sewn, if you want to trim down the seam allowance, you definitely can. I think no, I'll trim it down. I'll trim it down. I will. So I'm just trimming the seam allowance in half. That's kind of my go-to. It says to trim it to an 1/8 of an inch, but half is about the same. All right, so now we're going to install these little D-ring connectors. I'm going to show you how I do it. The first thing you want to do is measure 7 inches up from the bottom edge and make a mark right on the seam. We're working on the back side of our panels here. Now I'm going to show you how I do this with this material and this hardware. You might have to adjust this depending on what you're using, okay? So grab your little screw here as well and just use your scrap of Decoville Heavy to just trace little circles that are bigger than the screw. It doesn't have to be an exact measurement, it just needs to be a little bit bigger, but not too big. Now I'm not going to use my hole punch for this because I want the hole for these screws to be very, very small in my vinyl. So I'm actually going to use a stiletto for this, which is going to require a little finagling. So when we're installing these screws, one of the big things is that we're going to install it pretty much right on the seam, but you don't want to cut any of your stitching. So any of the stitching you just did, we don't want any of that to be broken because then the whole thing will unravel. So we want to get close to it. So you're going to have to pick a side, the front or the back. So I'm going to pick the back. So this right here is the back of the back panel. And where that 7-inch mark is, about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the seam, I'm just popping a hole through my material, which is vinyl, with my stiletto. I'm going to do the same thing on my Decoville Heavy, just making a hole, because these screws are not very big. So I'm going to take my screw, I'm going to pop it through the hole on my Decoville Heavy, and then from the back side, I'm going to push that screw through the hole on my vinyl, flip it to the right side over here and just gently push that screw to the front, just like that. Make sure you get the vinyl all off of the top of it. And then I'm going to grab one of my little pieces of hardware here with the D-ring. I'm going to add a small bit of glue inside where the screw goes. And then on the right side of the material, right here, I'm just going to screw this in place. Now, before you get it completely tightened, focus on the orientation of the D-ring. So you see here's the bag, here's the seam. You don't want it to be like this, right? You want it to be so the D-ring, when it's being used, is like this, all right? And you can see it's very close to the seam, but it's not cutting into the seam. So then I'm going to grab a screwdriver, flip this over, holding the D-ring in place on the front. I'm just going to tighten that screw on the back so it's nice and stable and I don't have to worry about it going anywhere. So there we go. Now we have the D-ring hardware installed. This is what it looks like. I'm going to repeat that exactly on the other side, also making my mark on the back panel just right next to that seam. Alrighty, once you have both the screws installed, this is what it looks like. They're very cool, and it's so much easier than like sewing in thick material into the seam, at least in my opinion. I think that's a great tool. Alright, so now let's box the exterior. So pull your seam on the side, right sides together with that midpoint mark on the short edge of your base panel, and clip them together. And as you do this, you can kind of flatten out that corner. So you should have a little box here on both sides. So get this nice and straight. Do the same thing on the other exterior box corner. All right, now we're going to sew along these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching on this one just because it does get the most pressure on it. So 3/8 of an inch, back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that boxed, you can trim the seam allowance down just a bit if you'd like, or you can leave it. I'm just going to trim it just a bit. All right, the exterior is all put together. Now we're going to do the lining. So grab your 2 lining panels that should already be sticking out over here. And let's pull them right sides together and line up these sides. So the 2 side edges, line those up and clip together. And just make sure you push that exterior out of the way. It's not invited to this party. So do this for both side edges of your lining. And now we're going to take this to a sewing machine and we're going to sew along both sides of the lining at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end each time. All right, I just realized I forgot to add my beautiful tag, which frustrates me. I can't believe I forgot that. Last time I added the tag to the first bag and it was a little high, so it's not as noticeable. So I'm going to add it a little bit lower this time. Even though I already sewed the side seams, I think I can still do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the midpoint mark here on the bottom of my lining, and I'm going to measure up 6 inches from that and just use that midpoint to keep it centered. And that's where I'm going to put my tag. Now it might be hard for you to see, but I'm going to put this 6 inches up from the bottom edge here. So for that, I'm just using some double-sided tape. All right, so it's a tight fit, but I can still do this. So I have it taped in place. I'm gonna go top stitch this to my lining at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around all 4 edges. All right, now looking at the bottom edge here, match up both the midpoint marks on the bottom and just clip this together. But we're not gonna sew along the entire bottom edge because we're gonna turn the bag out through this. So you can just measure 1 inch in from each side and make a mark along that bottom edge. And now we're going to sew from the raw edged box corners in towards that 1 inch mark and backstitch at the beginning and the end really well. And do this for both sides, but don't sew the middle here. So you're only sewing the little corners down here. Leave the middle completely unsewn. All right, and if you'd like, you can trim down the seam only where you sewed it. So no further, not in the opening. You can trim it down just a bit. All right, now let's box the lining corners. So just pull the lining pieces away from each other, and the side seam and the bottom seam should come together, and you can just flip them in opposite directions if you'd like, and then clip these 2 raw edges together. All right, now sew along both these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that boxed bottom done, you're gonna open the hole in the lining and you're going to pull the exterior and the whole bag through that hole in the lining gently. All right, once you have the main part flipped out, gently push out the little handles on the top. These are not a tight fit, so it should not be difficult to push out these raw edges. There we go. So then tuck in the lining so you can just take a look at your bag. That looks so cute. I know it still kind of is like, what is this gonna look like? It all comes together in the end. So now pull your lining out, and we're gonna work on closing the hole in the lining. So you can just tuck your fingers into that hole and give it a gentle tug and push down all the raw edges so they're tucked in there. And grab your clips and clip along the folded opening to hold it shut. And now we can just top stitch right along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch the beginning and the end. Right, now you can just tuck in your lining. You're done with that. Now we're going to install our zipper ends. So take one of the top straps of your bag and flip the zipper teeth so they're coming together. And I always like to just kind of lay it out so that it's as straight as possible and figure out which coil needs to be on the top. So like when I push this together and I flatten it out, the right side, the coil on the right side needs to be on top. So I'm going to insert that coil first into one of my zipper pulls. And then I'm going to insert the left side, and then looking from the top, I'm going to kind of be able to see them. And I just want to make sure I can see the right side coil on top, and then just push down with my finger and then carefully pull the zipper down. See? There we go. So now don't put it all the way, because we're going to insert the other zipper pull on the other side. Same thing. Just kind of straighten it out, figure out which coil you want on top. Once we get them both installed, we'll see if we need to adjust anything. There we go. Install that one. Now looking at them, when they come together, there shouldn't be a big hole between them. So if you're kind of like, this looks crazy here, just flatten this out real quick. If you want to feel better about how it looks, flatten it out like that, and then curl this down, and you can see it all comes together nicely. So all that worrying about, is it too wobbly? Is it too wavy? Nope, it's not. So as long as there's not like a big bubble between them, then they're perfect. So I'm just gonna leave them like that. Those look great. This is looking so cute. Now, if you need to trim down the top edges of this in any way, if it's all wonky, go ahead and trim it down and clean it up. One thing I'm gonna do now that it instructs us to do later, this top is just a little bit wide for what we're gonna do next. So what we're gonna do is right at the top, at the seam for the exterior panels, we're gonna just kind of like fold it in on itself. See, I'm just kind of just folding the left side or the right side, whichever one you want, but I'm taking the left side over here and folding it a little bit over towards the right side, just kind of pinching it just to make this whole top a little bit more narrow. And it's reducing it by about 1/4 of an inch, just a little pinch. And I'm gonna use a clip to hold that in place. I'm gonna do that on the other side as well. This is just gonna ensure that we don't have any of these little raw corners peeking out when we install the lock panels. So just pinch it over like that and clip in place. And now the pattern uses staples, but I'm just gonna sew it. I'm gonna just sew at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching right over this little fold over to hold it in place. All right, so that's all nice and tucked in. And if you'd like to use your lighter to just melt down any little threads at the top here, just to clean it up. This is all gonna be hidden, but it's nice to keep it clean. All right, the bag part you can put to the side now. So let's grab our lock connector pieces. Now I'm gonna do this a little bit different from the pattern just because this is what worked well for my material with the way I'm doing this. The material we have in the box has this like little fleecy backing here. You can pull it away from the vinyl and rip it really easily. So I'm gonna go around and just rip off as much of it as I can around my deck elbow heavy because I just don't need it. Because I'm trying to get this as thin as possible. Now the pattern is gonna have you trim a bunch of triangles around this. If that works with your material, then go for it. I am not a patient person, so I did one like that, and then I realized I could do it another way, and it looks similar, again, because of the material I'm using. So this is just much easier for me. There we go. So I'm gonna pull the backing off of the seam on all of my lock connector pieces. All right, it doesn't look beautiful, but it thins out the vinyl nicely. And so now pretty much what we wanna do is we just wanna wrap this vinyl around the stabilizer and top stitch it in place. Now, however you wanna do that, if you wanna cut the triangles you can. I find I can just shave off a little bit on the corners. And this again is going to be material specific. But this is what I found working with this. And I'm not even using double-sided tape, but if you want to, you can. So I'm going to fold down the side edges, so like the longer edges. And then I'm going to slowly go around and fold down the corners. And I'm allowing it to fold in on itself on the back side. So it's getting all, you know, bulky and stuff on the back, which is fine because again, the material is thinner, so it's not going to be hard to sew. And I don't really care how it looks on the back. I just want it to look nice and clean on the front. So you can see I'm just going around here. And so if you shave down the corners like I did, you just want to make sure you don't shave them down too much because then you're not going to be able to catch them on the back. So it just, you have 4 of these to practice on. So I just kind of do like a rough go around first. And then I'll look at the front and see where I need to clean it up. All right, so on the front side, if I see any like just real jagged edges, I'll just kind of massage those. And you can see I'm not like cutting little slits into this. I find it looks okay without it. And then I pay a lot of attention to it at the sewing machine as well. As I'm top stitching, if I see an area that needs to be smoothed out, then I'll smooth it out before I sew over it. But this is how I prep one of them. I'm going to repeat that with the other 3. All right, once you have all of these clipped, taped, glued, however, so that they're wrapped cleanly, we're going to take them to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along each one of these at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Keep the tails nice and long because we will knot them on the back and tape them down. All right, now that you have all these top stitches, just check the back to make sure you caught everything. If you have any really big bulky bits that are long, you can trim them down if you'd like. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the bobbin thread and pull on it just a little bit. Like we were doing with the bag, we're going to pull the top thread to the back. You're going to do this for both top threads. And then once you have all 4 threads on the back, you can just split them into 2 and 2 and then do 3 nice tight knots. And then you can trim that if you'd like, or what you can do is just kind of move it over towards the side. Grab a little bit of tape, any kind of tape, and tape the thread down. And then trim off any really long overhang like that. So you just kind of tape it out of the way. So you can repeat that with the other 3 connectors. All right, once you have all of these prepped, now we can use these to install the lock. So grab 2 of these connectors, make sure that they line up well, and we're going to use 2 of these to install the male end of the lock first. So I like to just kind of fold this in half and find the midpoint on the back of one of the connectors. And then I'll grab the washer for the male end and always check to see where those prongs are going to go in. So you know where the middle is. That's going to be directly in the middle. So line up your washer straight over your midpoint mark on the back of one of your connectors and then mark placement for the prongs, just like that. And then grab a seam ripper and gently seam rip through those 2 marks that you made very slowly and make them very small. And then take the male end and insert it from the right side of the material, just like that. Take the washer, add it to the back, and then open up those prongs to get it nice and tight in there. And I'm going to add a little bit of tape to the back of this, always to protect material from that metal. There we go. And now on the connector with the male end, you're going to measure up 1 inch from one of the short edges. Try to get it nice and straight and mark a line. Now grab your bag and turn it so you're looking at the right side of your zipper. And what you're going to do is you're going to attach it just like this so that the top edge of that zipper lines up with that 1 inch mark, just like that. First, we got to get some glue on this. So So I'm just going to add some glue below that 1 inch mark, and don't let the glue go past the top stitching. There we go. So then again, zipper side up. This is important that it's zipper side up right now, and that this is the piece with the male end. And center this on that connector. There you go. Grab some clips to hold in place. There we go. So this one is attached for now. And then we're going to take its little buddy over here connector, and we're going to just completely cover the back of this with glue, any type of glue that works for you. So it needs to be something strong. It needs to be meant a permanent glue, not a temporary adhesive. So this Beacon 3-in-1 seems to be working well for me, but again, there's like cement glue, there's E6000. You want to really cover this though, and don't go past the top stitching. There you go. Once you have a bunch of that on there, we're going to take this, we're going to place it wrong sides together with the connector that's already gluing to the bag, and we're going to clip together. Now I'm just using these little clover clips. They worked fine with my other bag. Any little indentions that show up after you take them off, they do go away. So I don't have any problem with that. Big thing here is we want this glued as tight as we can get it. And the hardest part is making sure the glue sticks down here. So for that, you can use bigger clips. You can use some of these types of clips. There's lots of options. You just want to make sure everything is being pushed together so that glue really holds it all in place. So that's why they said you can use binder clips for this as well, because those are nice and big. Whatever it takes. Get it to glue. All right, because we're not sewing it. We're leaving it, the glue is what's going to hold that together. All right, so set this to the side. Grab your remaining 2 connectors here, and then on one of them, find the midpoint, just like you did on the other connectors. All right, so once you have your midpoint marked on one of the back sides of your connectors, you're going to take the screws out of the female part of this turn lock. So we're separating both pieces of this. So the flat piece is the back piece. That's what's going to go on the back here. And this is what we're going to use to help us mark everything for placement. So take this back piece and center it over your center mark as best you can. And then mark in the holes on the side and then trace that inner oval as well. So then grab your hole punch and find a punch size that the small rounded parts, the outer rounded parts of your connector can fit into. So this needs to be able to go through all the material. So use that big punch to punch out the holes that you marked on your connector, and then use your seam ripper. And what I like to do is I just actually use my seam ripper and carefully and slowly trace around the outside of that oval that I drew in the center. And just go nice and slow while you do this. All right, once you have that cut out, grab the front piece and just lay it on the exterior part and make sure that the center oval and then the two screw holes on the side can fit through everything that you marked. So it looks just like that. All right, so once that's good, take this and then lay it wrong sides together with the remaining connector piece here. And then use your marking tool and just trace the holes you've already cut out from the other side. There we go, because we're going to cut these exact same holes out of this other connector piece. And you just want to make sure it's in the right spot. So just like we did on the other side, we'll take the hole punch to punch the screw hole bits. And then we can take a seam ripper to gently cut the oval in the center. All right, and then once again, take the front piece here that has the prongs or the pieces that stick out and make sure it all fits through those holes that you cut. And if it doesn't, then you just have to cut a little bit more. So now take one of these pieces and mark 1 inch up on the back side from the short end of your connector, and then grab your glue of choice and add a good amount of glue all underneath that 1 inch mark. And then just go as far as the top stitching. Don't go past the top stitching. Now grab your bag and lay your strap so it's zipper side up, and then just center the end of that strap bit with the zipper over the connector onto that glue, and use some clips to hold it together. And then grab your remaining connector and just completely cover this in glue, again all the way up to the top stitching but not past it, and then all over the back, being mindful of the holes that you left. All right, once you have the glue on there, now just pull this wrong sides together with the other connector that's already being glued to the bag, and then use your clips to hold it in place. Okay, and once you have these together, this is how it's going to line up. The side with the male end is going to go down first, and then the female side is going to be on top like that. And so if you look at it from the very top, the very, very top is where you want the pretty side of your twist lock female side. So just push it through all the openings that you punched out. And this may take some finagling. You may need to kind of push some of the material down. You may need to cut some more of the material. That's fine too. Just take your time here to really get all those metal bits through the material. And then take the back piece and lay that over the underside and gently screw these into place. And if you'd like, you can put a little bit of glue in the hole where the screws go to help set those screws so you don't have to worry about them kind of jiggling out over time. And then if you'd like, you can grab some more clips, like binder clips, something a little bit more stronger and bigger so that they can really hold these two pieces of material together. So as the glue sets, it's all closed in on itself. So now all we have to do is let these dry, and then the bag is done. You just attach the strap. All right, what do you think? How did you like it? How did you feel about it? I know it seems daunting. It's like, this seems like it's more of an advanced make with the material, with the pattern, but it's not. I would say this is a confident beginner. Definitely a confident beginner. I'd say have a little bit of practice, especially with zippers, adding zippers onto zipper tape. But once you're good with that, the curve's not that hard because you don't sew this curve, you know, you sew it much wider. It's a much easier curve to sew than what it looks like. And then I have my chain over here, and I'm just gonna add that onto my little D-rings. I love these D-ring strap connectors on the side. I feel like it's so much easier to attach these than it is to sew pieces of vinyl into the seam. You know, it gets kind of bulky, it gets a little wonky looking, sometimes the stitching isn't always great. This is such an easy thing, and you don't have to use a chain strap with it. You can still make your own strap. If you want to make like a real fancy strap or something like that, you can make that and attach this on. So you don't have to use the chain strap, but this is just so easy. Everything about this bag is surprisingly easy. I was expecting to really be sweating making this bag. And it was very pleasurable. It was a great bag to make. So I hope you love making this as much as I do. I'm interested to see what other types of material you guys are using. Obviously, I love this quilted vinyl. It makes it look like we did a lot of work when we didn't. But I would also love to use some smooth vinyl with this. I really want to use like some super sparkly kind of iridescent vinyl. There's a lot you could do with this. And I would also really be interested to use like quilt cotton maybe with some Decoville light. I feel like there's a lot you could do here. Or foam. Foam is another option in the pattern. If you've made this already, let me know what kind of material you use. And if you make this bag using the tutorial, please make sure you tag me. I'm at OklaRoots on all social media, Instagram, Reels, TikTok, Facebook. And also if you're using the kit from this month's Bag Making Bee Club, make sure you tag us. Don't forget that if you tag a photo of your kit or your make, you could win your next month's box for free. $0, absolutely free. So make sure you share your makes and tag the Bag Making Bee Club. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye guys. Thank you so much for watching today's tutorial. I hope that you are inspired to go make something and have a lot of fun with these patterns. If you're not already subscribed, please make sure you click subscribe down below. Also make sure you hit that little bell, the little notification bell. That's gonna make sure you're notified every single time we have a new video or when we go live. For even more fun content from OklaRoots, make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram. We do daily stories over there, which include unboxing, talks about books, other little mini tutorials, lots and lots of discussion over all kinds of things going on. You can also find us on TikTok and also on Reels for even more fun, kind of more random content. And if you really want to dive in for some behind the scenes content, free gifts, access to shop items before anybody else, and influence on upcoming videos, make sure you go check out OklaRoots over on Patreon. We have a lot going on over there and it's a fun place to hang out, and you are directly supporting the OklaRoots YouTube channel. These videos could not be possible without the help of my patrons. So thank you so much to everybody over there. Thank you again for watching today's tutorial. I hope you enjoy the videos. Go make something.